Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the NYBB webinar series. This is our fifth in the series of informational webinars that we're bringing to the marketplace, and hopefully some great information that'll help you in your business. My name is Anthony Citrolo. I'm the managing partner and a CPA with the NYBB Group in Melville, and it's my pleasure to be your host. I hope everyone is doing well and getting through hopefully what we would hopefully be the end of the pandemic, and hopefully your businesses and your clients are doing well, and your family more importantly. So I have the honor and privilege of being the host for three very distinguished folks who have been involved in the sale of businesses, family-owned businesses, personally owned businesses, and their stories are very interesting, and also some are typical, some are not typical. There really probably is no typical story of what one goes through when he or she sells his family business, but I think you'll be encouraged and excited and get information today from these folks. I'd like to, as a brief introduction, and you can, I invite the panelists to also enhance kind of their background. If I've missed something, I do apologize. So we have Joan Della Prida, who recently was the CEO of Island Medical Management. That business was a family-owned business owned by her brother, and it was purchased by a private equity firm. It was a large business. And she works with people who are looking on the business transition side. She works with people who need CFO services. She's been in the grind, so to speak, and probably gone through what people say are sometimes brutal integrations and post-merger periods, and gone through a lot of diligence, and is very good on the finance side as well. Our second business owner and also entrepreneur is Michael Brightman, who is an entrepreneur and owner. He's built and sold companies. He had a consumer products company that he'll talk about. Right now, he is the owner of Action Coach of Metro New York and the Berkshires, and he works with business owners and really helps them really develop teams of people who are really high performance teams. He's good at it because he's done it in his own business. And the third individual we have is Chris Vigiano. And Chris is a CPA, worked for a big 8 accounting firm. He then went into a family business, which was called FJ Gray and Company, which we were involved with. They did a leverage buyout of that company originally in 1985. Then it was sold in 2015. It was a bifurcated sale, sold in two parts. His background is very extensive. As a CPA, he's on many board of directors as well, of many companies. So he gets to look kind of on the inside looking out to see what a lot of companies are in fact doing in this day and age. So I'd like to welcome them to our panel and basically, I guess, get us started. So let's start with Joan. Joan, can you tell us a little about the business that you were involved with, and how you were involved with the company, maybe how it was started, and what part you played in it?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks, Anthony, for having me participate in your webinar. I was the CFO of Island Medical Management, which is an ER staffing business. That's a business where in some hospitals, the physicians in the emergency room do not work for the hospital. They work for a staffing company such as Island Medical. I've been with the company almost since inception. And for the first, the business, I was there 16 years, but would say for the first 10 years, the business was a steady state. And then the owner decided, he maybe wanted to retire. And with that, he took it into his hands to develop the company. We grew it. We went national, working with, investment banker and going national. And as Anthony had mentioned, a lot of the integration work, integrating the companies together that we had acquired over the years, and then bundled it all up for an ultimate sale, and a sale to a private equity firm.
That's great. And how long ago was it sold, Joan?
September of 2016 was the sale.
Okay, and you've survived since then, thank God, right? Well, we'll get into some of the details later. And Michael, I know yours was a business that you owned and operated, so just give us a little background on that business and how you were involved as well, how the company started.
I was, I actually don't know how the company started. I was a management consultant, and I was working out of Chicago, even though I was brought up in New York. And I was asked to look at installing a computer system for a company called Brookville Corporation. Or at the time, it was called Brookville Tie Makers, a manufacturer of men's neckties. And I brought a proposal in, and the accountant for the company basically told me that they didn't need a computer. They needed somebody to come in and run the company. And to be honest, I was set up by my father and this gentleman that I joined, and their joint accountant, because I was having some partner problems in Chicago. So I moved the family to New York in 1984. I joined the company, and 6 years, and I started to buy into the company. I was part of the deal. And 6 years later, the founder of the company passed away suddenly. So I wound up owning the company ahead of schedule. And over the next 11 years, built it up to the 8th largest necktie manufacturing company in the United States. I sold it in 2001 when casual dressing became a factor, a major factor, and volume started to drop.
Michael, did the owner, I mean, he passed away suddenly. Did he have any planning in place in the event something happened? Was the business transferred to anyone specific?
When I joined the company, I was his exit plan. And there was an insurance policy that allowed me to compensate his widow. But he had no heirs. That's why I was recruited.
Right.
And it was a good relationship. And it was a great opportunity because it combined my two previous careers. One was management consulting for manufacturers, and before that I was an architect, so I had the artistic background and the management background to really build that company.
That's good. And Chris, I know you came into you were part of a family-owned business, right? So if you can give a little background on how you were involved, and if you know how that company started as well.
Sure. Well, Frank Gray was the original starter of the company, wartime era, and was in Brooklyn and was doing subway glass bends with Corning glasses, architectural and lighting glasses back in the day before plastics, when all the lighting had to be glass. And plastics then took that over, and then he just began to manufacture and fabricate some of other Corning glasses and other architectural glasses, some lighting, then did some optics and filters, and was growing it and recruited my father-in-law to come run his company for him back in the late 60s. My father-in-law worked for Corning and was a rep and dealt with it. So he came in to run it, and then Frank suddenly passed away in 1984. My father-in-law was 58. The estate wanted him to take over and run the business. He did not want to start that at 58. Talked to me. I was working with Arthur Anderson, and at the time, merger and acquisitions. I told him I would help him try to figure this out and try to work out something so he could, sell the company, yet still help manage it, own half of the company, which he owned none of. In the end, I said, I think I'd like to try this myself. I've been consulting enough people. I have, at that time, I had 2 going on 3 children, and wanted to spend more time with family than traveling that I was in Anderson. So I took the risk and took over the business with him and let him retire in his 4 years that he wanted to. I just said, you have to teach me the glass business. I had him own half the company, me the other half, and he retired. When he passed in 94, he had no plan, no pension, nothing. But I got buy-sells agreements together, and I backed it with insurance so that his wife wound up walking away comfortably with the value of his company. I wound up running it with his son, Bill, really since the mid-'80s through when we sold it in 2015. And it was time. I I was on a couple boards. One of the companies sold big time. I had enough funds. My brother-in-law and I were running it, and I said, I will help you do anything you can to try to run it yourself. It was a difficult business for him to run by himself. I tried to get him the right help. Unless I was there, it wasn't going to work. So I said, we need an exit plan. It could be roll it up. It could be shrink it so it's small enough for you to run it, or sell it. We chose the sell path because I wound up getting a pretty good deal. I thought I'd get him a contract to stay for 7 years and manage. The problem with that is, as you see in many of these things, once the company was about 3 times the size of us, and they knew nothing about the specialty optics and lighting business we had. They knew about the commercial architecture. So when they gave us an offer, within 3 weeks, I told them I could do better for you. I'll cut half your price off, and I'll sell the other half of the company, and we'll close them both at the same time. We did that, and I wound up benefiting, and they wound up benefiting by not having to deal with a business they didn't know how to deal with. And we got to move half of the equipment out that was getting in their way to move their other operation in on top of ours because they really wanted this building. I remained the owner of the building and just leased it to them. Recently, I just sold the building, but not to them. Couldn't afford it.
Good. So I think just one quick thing now that the attendees, I usually wait till after the first point, is any attendee who, and thank you for being here, but if you have a question, there's an attendee chat, just enter it there and we'll get to the questions when we finish our discussion, okay? So anybody who has a question or a comment, please do that. It's interesting, so I had 2 out of 3 here. We have sudden passing of the owners. It's very interesting because we speak to folks often about how that is something you got to consider. And if you're talking to the owner, they don't want to consider that, right? So, but obviously it does in fact happen. And oftentimes it's at too young an age. But what I'd like to do, Joan, if you could talk about what were some of the obstacles in the operation itself? I mean, how were the family dynamics? I mean, you could talk a little bit, maybe the financial ownership. I mean, who was really in control in the management, but the dynamics are important.
Well, I think the original obstacle in the dynamics was, it was solely owned by my brother, and he wanted to sell, and he thought he could do it on his own. And like, you're an ER physician. I don't think you should try to sell your business by yourself. His goal was to retire by the time he was 60. We convinced him, myself and a few other managers, to, seek help, go to an investment advisor. You cannot do this on your own. It took a lot of convincing. And then he started to hear about what he thought his business was worth. Then when you bring someone professional in, he realized, I can get this much more if I do the following thing. So that was the first obstacle, convincing him, not to do this on his own. It was his business. So no one else had any equity. He was 100% owner. And when, he said go. So he wanted to sell, and this was the plan. We put a plan in place for 5 years, and we executed. He took care, we put some policies in place to take care of the management, but it was his decision. It was a solely owned business.
Yeah, and he was active in the business day in and day out, right? I mean, he was actually running the business as well, right?
Right, but 10 years in, he stopped seeing patients, and he was running the company, running the operations, or running the finances of the company.
Oh, okay. So he was actually acting as a medical doctor in the emergency room prior to that.
Correct.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. Sometimes, so you have 100% ownership there, Michael. I guess you were 100% owner after you took over too, right?
Yes, after my partner passed away, I was 100% owner. So 6 years we were partners. And
were you even partners, or was he a majority partner? You were a minority?
I was buying in. No, he was a majority partner actually until he passed.
Okay.
And I was buying stock, but we had an agreement up front when I joined that we would vote together, or it would be a no decision. And so that was very helpful. That was pounded out by the lawyer who worked out my coming into the company. That was very, very good. But as we were discussing and preparing for this webinar, for the 3 of the 6 years that we were partners, we were stumbling over each other. We shared an office, and I would call somebody and find out that he had called them 5 minutes before me, or at the end of the day, it said, "Did you call Joe?" "No, I thought you were calling Joe," and whatever. And then he had a TIA, like a mini stroke, and he lost his memory for a day. And our accountant convinced him to back off, which was his original plan. Go play more golf. And let Michael run the business. So after that, I ran the business. And I have to tell you, he was an old-fashioned businessman. He taught me, walk around the factory, look left, look right, and see. But if orders were going out late, for example, he would walk around and figure out why the orders were going out late. My style was to go to the shipping manager and ask him why the order's going out late and work backwards from there. So under my operating the business, the team really had to develop. They blossomed because they knew how to make a tie, they knew how to ship and get the work done. And so my philosophy is that the people in the trenches know more than the people sitting in the ivory tower. And
I have one quick question. What did you, without going into real specifics, what did your buy-in look like? Because people may be interested in knowing. So you came into a business where the owner had 100% ownership, and now you had a certain percentage. Like, did you earn the buy?
Yes, I had a relatively low salary. I mean, I'm not complaining, and there was a bonus, and that would buy stock. Periodic bonuses.
Bonus was based on the company's results, right?
Yes. And it was when I joined, it was a small company. It was very profitable, so that wasn't an issue. And as I said, I built it up. It was the 8th largest. I had nearly 100 employees, and we were producing in Hempstead 1.25 million to 1.5 million neckties a year.
Wow.
Well, and some of us are wondering if we're ever going to have to make a necktie again.
I don't know.
I'm not really sure.
All my equipment went to China. They're making them in China.
Hey, Chris, I know you had a lot of family dynamics there because you had a brother-in-law and you had a lot of things going on. I mean, how did that work in the operations of the business? And you came in, you were pretty strong-willed because you had a great financial background, a great business background. So how did that all mesh together?
Well, we were lucky it worked well. My father-in-law, who was part of it, was very hands-on and knowledgeable on the technical side. Did teach me a lot, and his son came in, originally worked in the plant for years through college. So his real task when we worked together was to spend more time with customers and with any issues in the plant and production. Mine was in managing the finance stuff and then also dealing on some hiring customers with more technical stuff to try to gain their confidence and show that we could develop and do the products that they needed, and work with some of the higher end technical stuff, build it more of the commercial end stuff. So we did split it, and he wound up being a very detailed guy, almost too detailed. I was trying to get him out of the trenches and into more upper level management as years went by. But it's tough to get somebody who likes to micromanage to change. So that's why years later, we worked well as a team, but when I wanted to spend less time, there wasn't really anything concentrating on the higher end of the sales and growth. So that's when I tried to get him some help in sales and some help in the factory so he could come up in sales more and spend more time on larger marketing rather than maintaining customers. And it was obvious that was not going to work. So that's when I said, we need to make a plan because you're not going to be able to do it alone. And I'm not going to do this for the next 10 years. I'd like to wind it up. So we both agreed the right plan would be a sales of a company strategy where he maintains a position where he could do what he did best, which is keep the current customers happy, do some work in the plant to manage, make sure things would continue to go right when they needed to, as far as production, but the new owners really wanted him just to grow sales. They didn't want to use him how he was good, what he did good for 20 years.
Mm.
And then they wound up cutting him off because they expected something different than what we told them to expect. So
Yeah.
it worked great for us because we did exactly what we each knew our strengths were. They wanted something different.
Interesting.
So they ended.
So one of the things, we speak to folks all the time about timing, right? And without exception, most folks say, "I wish I started earlier," or "I wish I, would have planned a little sooner." I mean, when you look at the timing of the respective sales of your companies, what do you think? I mean, should they have started earlier? Do you think they should have? Maybe they would have hung on a few more years. What do you think really? When you look at the timing of the transaction that actually happened, was it really timed properly? Do you think it got the most value possible, or what could have been different, Joan, if you look at it?
Surprisingly, and I know this doesn't happen often, I think the timing went very well. I mean, when the owner decided to sell and he was told, you're not worth much, give yourself 5 years, grow from a local Long Island business. If you grow national, you'll be able to get so much more in terms of a multiple. We truly set out with a 5-year plan, and in 5 years he sold. The ultimate sale, once we integrated the companies we bought together and we started speaking to private equity firms, that only took a year. So I know it doesn't, to me, I'm like, oh, all right, you bundle things together, you set out on a plan, you sell a business, it all works out. I know that's rare. That doesn't usually work like that. We presented to many different private equity firms, got several offers, just didn't take the highest one. We went with the company we thought would do the best for this business. So I think it's rare, though. I don't think it works that easily and that well for most companies. I want to sell my business in 5 years, and I'm going to do, A, B, C, and D, then bundle it and sell it. It worked for us.
Yeah, we always find there's such a value disparity too in terms of what the expectations of the owner are versus what the market price is, and it tends to delay the transaction until the owners come to terms with the fact that if you've got three or 4 or 5 offers and they're all in the same range, that in fact is the value of the company. Michael, if I go to the same question about timing, I mean, yours was an interesting one because you had an idea of what was going to happen from a fashion standpoint in the marketplace, and did the person not have that idea? And do you think the timing was just perfect or a little premature?
The reverse. I think I waited about, I could have gotten more money for the company a year before.
A year before?
Yeah, I waited a little too long. We had a good business. And as I, look back, it was casual dressing, but it was also the fact that I was a vendor to the department stores, selling brands under licenses, and the department stores all merged up in the 80s and 90s, and they started to get very aggressive with chargebacks and other BS, and as I said yesterday when we were preparing for this, I came to hate my customers, which is never healthy. It got more difficult to deal with the department stores, and casual dressing didn't help.
Yeah, it's funny because that's the story we hear when anybody dealing with what they would call big box stores today, right? Yeah. Between the control they have on you over pricing, over chargebacks, over payment, over terms, everything seems to be difficult. So. Chris, how about yourself? I mean, when you look at it, I mean, from a timing standpoint, because yours was a complicated sale because you had to sell it in 2 parts. I mean, do you think you should have started earlier, or was that a difficult chore because you had more than one person to convince about that?
Well, yeah, 2. My brother-in-law was 11 years younger than me. So as far as places where he would go, there weren't many places he'd be able to do as well as he did because of our unique ability to work together, and I was able to do that. Whereas if he went somewhere else, he definitely did not have that value. So there was that concern. But when 2009 and 10 rolled around, We were at our peak sales, boom, with some great technical stuff. I turned and looked at my brother-in-law and said, I know we don't have any kids in business. I know it's just us. It's going to depend on if you're going to be able to continue later without me at some point, because I was in my mid 50s, later 50s, and said, there's no way I'm going to work past my 60s because I have more hobbies and time I wanted to spend doing. He said, this is the time. We're going to get more money this year than we ever will. But when we do it, know that whoever takes it, we can try to get a contract for you. But like all things, it's going to be different. You may not last long. So we both looked at each other and said, we love what we do. We love our customers. We love our vendors. I know this is the right time to sell, but it wouldn't have been good for him. I was fine because I did so well with the oil and gas boards. And I said, you know what? We'll hang on and we'll see if we can keep making this bloom. It did not. We wound up with some very difficult times as we got closer to wanting to sell. And that was one of the reasons to push to sell. We still managed fine, but nowhere near what we would have had I sold 3 or 4 years earlier when we were in a boom. Growth was jumping off the charts and we had some really great sales. And I knew individually, we're not going to get another group like that again in specialty sales, but I could have sold it much better. But it was you do have to look at family. And my sister, it was her brother, would have killed me if I sold and left him kind of out in the cold and having to find a smaller or different job. I said, but he's going to do fine. It was a tough dynamic. So again, family businesses, you do things that are right for the entire family. And it was fine for me. Wasn't going to get hurt. And we sold better than I thought we would. We did a really good job at that by splitting it to 2 because we got greater value than it was for 1. And that helped.
Sure.
And recognizing that was going to work because the guys buying us had no clue as to what to do with this other piece of the business. And I knew I could do better. So in the end, that worked out better. And it was a great answer for me. I loved getting out. I wasn't happier in the world to do that. I loved no longer having to deal with unions, employees, office people, everything else. It was just so much nicer to begin the next phase of my life with grandchildren and family and golf and fishing and diving and skiing, all the things I like doing. Started then at a great pace. And he survived for 3 years, and then they cut him off. So he didn't do too bad. He wound up somewhere else fine. And the money he got out of that, now the money from the building puts everybody, nobody's got to worry in the world. So it worked out in the end.
And we'll say on that point, it's interesting because we find that everyone, without exception, I think, really believes they should have done it, whatever they do, a couple of years before. Unfortunately, most people don't plan real well, or something befalls, they end up ill, or something happens, or a key employee disappears, or things that you really can't expect. And if you're looking at your staff, and everyone in your staff is on the older side, I don't want to use a number because I'm on the older side, but if they are, you really have to look at it and say, these folks aren't going to be working forever. If I rely on them, it could really damage my business. Plus, 2 of the cases here, the owners had passed away. But my next question really is, so the deal is done. There's transition going on. Okay. Now, Joan, you were there for 18 months. I mean, how was the transition smooth? I mean, was it difficult? Did you have so much pushback? Or were they kind of questioning everything that they had bought? Or give me an idea of what was in their head.
Well, first of all, I knew the night we closed that my job was over. I mean, that had been set up in the beginning. They wanted to double the business and then take it public. That's not something I was going to do for them. So I knew exactly where I stood with Newco, right, when the private equity firm came in. And I was well taken care of, so it wasn't a matter of I needed a job. For the 18 months, I had to train different CFOs. They bring a CFO in, it didn't work, the gentleman left. They brought another CFO in, so I was helping them train this CFO different until they finally found one that fit well with the business. It was awkward. It was my staff, now it's their staff. It's not easy, but you also have to, work well with the new company, with the new owners. There were, earnouts and parameters we had to meet. So it was a lot of work in the beginning. So you couldn't be too much animosity because you had to work with these people. Was it difficult perhaps for the owner to have to answer to someone that he's answered to himself for 20 plus years? Yes. That dynamic. We had 3 corporate offices. The New York office was the smallest, so we knew it was going to close. That was hard as I had to start to let my staff go as I trained other people. And, that was the hard part. We knew New York was going to close down. So, and you worked with people for so many years, and there was more of that, Anthony, than anything else. And the private equity firm, they made a lot of demands on people. They always want data. They want to look at data different ways and different how you're looking at it. And you have to just welcome that and stop being like, nope, we didn't do it that way. It has to be like, okay, you want to see it this way? I don't know why, but you kind of had to embrace that. And I had to teach my staff to embrace whatever they're asking us for. They want to look at it this way. These guys are the new owners. Just let's get the data out. It was a lot of that in the first couple of months. Changed CPA firms. They changed a lot of stuff we had put in place. That was also very difficult. Changed the CPA firm, changed the benefits. But, it was a new owner. They could do whatever they want. And that was hard for people to get their hands around.
We also tell folks, the transition is important because a lot of times there's some escrow, there's holdback. So you want to earn all of your money back. And if you don't help in the transition and it doesn't go right, sometimes you end up getting penalized in one way, shape, or form. Michael, you sold to a larger company, right?
Yes.
And so were you involved in the transition? Did they kick you out the door or did they
the company that I sold to did not manufacture neckties. They imported them. And so they were interested in the licenses I held, the brands. And so we basically shut down. And that's why I separately sold off the equipment, the production equipment, and then ultimately the building, which was in a separate entity. But there was a holdback against markdowns of merchandise that was in the stores, and that was a difficult transition because the owner of the company that I sold to, who was based in California, started to play games with the holdback, and I ultimately had to sue him. But and I had a very, very good lawyer who asked some very good questions about how the holdback would work. And when the buyers started to do 180 degrees around different from what the example of the holdback was, we had a very good case against them. So I sued and I won, and I got back virtually, I got back everything minus legal fees that were reduced because we prepared for this guy. The gentleman that owned the company that bought my company had a bad reputation in the industry. And ultimately he went bankrupt because he messed around with enough people.
Well, it's funny because we one of the pieces of advice we give folks is make sure you're using an attorney who's used to doing transactions such as yours, as opposed to someone who that's not really their specialty. And yours is an example of where it benefited. Sometimes it doesn't come back to haunt folks, but when it does, it can be very expensive, And Chris, Chris, the transition on your business, I mean, it was interesting because your brother-in-law stayed behind, right, and kind of worked, and then didn't stay for as long as expected. And how was the rest of the transition as far as you know it?
Well, let me just backstep one thing about timing. Soon as you start thinking that you should retire or that you want to, or you want to move to the next phase, you're probably a year late because you haven't done the right thing for your company during that past year to grow it. And you lose your aggressiveness and the company doesn't flourish because you're already mentally beginning the thought process. You're too late. You're a year behind. So that's one thing. And that goes with like, oh, I should have fired the foreman because he's not been performing. If you've been thinking about it, you're probably a year late. You probably deserve to go a year before that. It's just that once your process starts, you need to move quickly. Don't put it off for years. The other on transition, they wanted me to help a little on the finance side, but when I got to look at who they were, I walked away from it. I didn't want, when we did the deal, I said, I have no commitment. I'm not going to be paid. I'm not going to have a contract. You're contracting your times with my brother-in-law. That's who needs to work for the next 10 years. That's who you should be using because he knows the customers and knows the manufacturing. You're going to want his knowledge and skill to do that to benefit. But I was worried that they were going to lose even our salespeople because they were not like us. They didn't treat them the same. They lost the people who knew the customers. They treated my brother-in-law poorly and they used him poorly. So their transition went bad and they did not do well with the customer base we sold them because they didn't do it right. And I didn't want any part of them because I was, like I said, mentally, I was thinking of the next phase. I knew I would not do the right thing by trying to get paid to stay around. I would have regretted that. I was glad I did not do that. So my transition was a month or two of looking at what I could do for them for books. Once I realized they had no interest in good books or good finances,
Yeah.
I walked away and said, I'm not going to be a part of the bad problem.
Hmm.
It is all on you.
And the interesting part, I think they had the best chance of doing well because they really were in the same industry. They were in the
Same
same,
industry. They could have, but they were they were known as bad actors when they came in, but they were the only ones offering us a great price. They had a reason for it. They wanted the building. I got the best sales price. Again, I thought that was a wiser move for us. My
Yeah.
brother-in-law in the end wound up being able to go to another glass company, not quite at the same position he was here, but done well enough. So it worked out.
So he didn't have any kind of restrictions that caused him not to be able to do that, right? Because
Well, they lost that when they broke the contract.
right, they terminated his contract, right? They
They
didn't keep.
they just stopped paying him. They didn't do it. They just stopped. So he took them to court because they're such evil people. That still hasn't settled yet.
Wow.
And they became my tenants,
Well,
which that's thus why I sold the building. I didn't want that problem long term either.
yeah, and I guess they're still there, right? But somebody else's problem.
Now it's the new owner's problem as of June 9th.
Hmm.
And he's got a problem because one of the partners who purchased the business just died.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's not going to be fun to watch what goes on over the next 6 months here.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is your cash is in the bank, right? So you're okay.
Correct. I already reinvested everything. I'm done.
You know, and I think, I mean, maybe we've answered this, but if you really look at the big picture, I mean, what could have, in a perfect world, what could have really been done differently? What do you think was the one point where, boy, if I had this to do over again, this is probably something either in Joan's case, maybe you'd advise your brother in terms of that, or, something maybe you could have prepared for ahead of time.
Hmm.
I'll start with you. Maybe it's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were well prepared, especially when it comes to the due diligence, keeping all the data, having such neat, organized electronic files, but you're never prepared for the amount of diligence and the amount of requests a private equity firm or anyone who's buying you, or whether it be a bank for the financing. And I don't
Did
know
you
how
guys have audited financials, Joan? Did you guys have audited financial statements?
Mm-hmm.
You had them prior to the acquisition, or you did it because of the acquisition?
No, years prior. But
Okay.
even with the work papers that go into an audit, it was an incredible amount of data requests. And I don't know how you could prepare for that. I don't know how you'd keep a data room. We just spent a lot of time pulling information. Well, your contracts. It was a huge task, the due diligence and the underwriting of everything. But I don't, and I thought I was very organized. So I don't know how you'd better prepare for that. And the disruption, like the disruptions to the staff was pretty bad. The few staff that knew what was happening, right? So
Yeah, and I'm not sure you can prepare for that in any way. That's just one of those things where you really can't let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, too early. I mean, And Michael, I guess the same question to you. I done differently, or and what was the impact on your staff? Because obviously they just bought the licenses, so your staff disappeared, right?
Right. A couple of my people retired at a young age because I took care of my key people. I was union. The union absorbed the sewing machine operators and moved them to other companies. Yeah, so that, but as it became known that we put ourselves up for sale, there was some unrest within the team. You know, and so you have to, that's why I let everybody know that I was going to take care of them.
Yeah.
And I did. You know, it's interesting. I want to go off the question a little bit, but, you know, based on what Chris is saying, and certainly Joan, my philosophy now is, and I work with my clients, I've been saying for the last 2 years, prepare your business to be sold even if you have no plans to sell it.
Right.
You just have a stronger business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Chris, I guess same thing. What could have been done differently? And also, you had some key employees there also, right? Did they remain at a certain, are there any of them still there? I mean, you had some folks who've been with you for a long time, and I guess what could have been done differently there as well?
Well, the key plant people did stay in place, so that was good. They were union, so they kept that. The sales office people, they gradually just disintegrated them. They were just poor managers, did not know how to work with them, gave them different expectations, and drove them out. And that was the group who held that customer base together. And they made big mistakes, but it wasn't like I was unaware that they were like that. When we were selling, we prepared our employees that this could be a likely possibility within 2-3 years. It's kind of how long it lasted for some of the key people in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And they left pretty much, both of them agreeing that it wasn't the right place for them. So our timing would have been, if we had done anything different, it would have been sell at your peak, don't sell at your bottom. Know when you peak. Good luck knowing that. But when you really get to a good spot and and you think there's opportunities and you could do other things, it is a good time to sell. If you really love what you're doing, keep doing it. You could succeed. But again, as I said, if you start individually feeling like you want to retire and move on and do something different, it would have been, that's the time to do it right then and there. It would be at the best point. We wound up lucky in that it all worked out for us. But I think we're lucky that happened.
Yeah, you're not kidding. And if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. And I think we're coming to kind of close to the end. But here's the thing: what I'd like to do is I'd like to know, you know, if you really had, you know, some real advice to somebody who has a family-owned business, and you know, they were even not necessarily at the stage where they think they're old enough. I mean, you know, what advice would you give them that would be kind of valuable for them looking at it on a going forward basis? You know, a lot of times when we speak to people, they go, when should we plan the exit of our business? I go, when you buy it. Because if you really kind of know what the goal is at the end, you can kind of create the path. No one really does that. I mean, very rarely do they do that. But of course, that's the goal, right, Joan? And when the private equity buys it, right, they're thinking they're going to exit it in 5 years. So
absolutely.
You know, if you give somebody that advice, Joan, what would you think? I mean, is great advice.
I mean, like Michael had said, I would keep your back office in order as much as possible, electronic, as a matter of fact, so you don't have to spend nights and weekends PDFing you know, years of contracts that someone wants to review. That, you know, keep yourself ahead of the curve at all times. I would absolutely hire an investment advisor because they're business owners. You're not familiar with the space. You're not familiar with valuations, and you have to get yourself a good corporate attorney, someone who is familiar with mergers and acquisitions or sales. But even setting up the business in its infancy, whether you can buy, sell, or you have key employees you want to take care of. whether it be through stock options or however you want to take care of them, that has to get put in place. Those are the people that are going to help you grow, and those are also the ones that probably get let go post the sale. So you got to have your back office in order years before you want to sell.
Sure.
Right.
Michael, if you put your coaching hat on too, I mean, not just your own business, you've seen hundreds and hundreds of business owners, right? And I mean, really, I mean, what are some key, pieces of advice you'd give, and maybe talk to them about how you can help them too?
Well, I think that the big thing is to get owners into an owner headspace where they're developing and creating the environment for their team to succeed. If they're a professional, like your brother who's a doctor, Joan, then there's a dotted line. They're part of the team as well. But it's more about working on the business and creating that environment and preparing the business, as I said a few moments ago, to be sold even if they have no plans to sell. I always used to say that the corporate intelligence walks out the door every evening when they go home. And so part of that preparation is to have, processes and procedures documented and well thought out, and all sorts of operational issues and reporting issues, key performance indicators, and a mission that everybody understands.
Yeah, good. Chris, what would you think too?
Well, I was always a big planner. I did that with many companies, and all small businesses I see, nobody has a plan for bad emergencies, like if one person dies, or you got to put buy sells in place. You got to be able to take care of the other families without having them get involved with the business if they know nothing about the business. You've got to know how to plan transition well before you're ever going to transition.
Mm-hmm.
Have more than one game plan, not just one. Have an alternative, have a sale plan, have a transition plan, have a plan if you're going to use internal people to take over. Have a couple of paths that you're always considering and working on. Plan for the worst. Have things in place that if things do go bad, you have a plan that can capture that. And if plans go really well, learn how to take advantage of it when you can. But you're not going to do that unless you at least consider all those plans. Too many of the small businesses I know that were in the same business I was in have no plan of transition whatsoever when they get to a point of, I'd say, delicacy, when they're either going to have a stroke or get out or want to retire. They don't make a plan. Need to make plans.
Yeah, and I look, a lot of folks come to us like their hair's on fire, right? And they feel, okay, this is the time to exit the business with no planning at all. And the last thing is, just from your personal observations, here we are. So we tell folks, hey, you got to be prepared. You never know what's going to happen. All of a sudden, we're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, if you really think about New York, I mean, we've gone from 9/11 to the 2008 recession to Hurricane Sandy. So we've been through the mill, right? And I said to somebody, so they said, well, in the last years, we've had everything that can happen. What could be next? The pandemic. Sure enough,
don't know.
As really crazy as it is, I mean, what do you think the state of the folks you talk to in business? I know, Joan, you've been out there talking to folks who are in business. I mean, are they? Do you think? I mean, from an exit standpoint, is their mindset, you think, on hold? Do you think they're kind of saying, gee, what's next?
The most obviously in the healthcare field is where I've been concentrating my time. I think for the most part, we're pretty surprised that it's impacting, even your basic medical practice. No one's going for physicals. No one's going to the dermatologist. Nobody's going to the dentist. I think it's more just people that are just shocked. Like, these businesses have lost 3 to 4 months of revenue. So I think for now, it's like wait and see how the year is going to pan out. I mean, how are you going to justify your financials this year in a sale when you've lost 4 months? And I think these doctors are very surprised. But so.
Yeah, they were taken. Michael, I'm sure you've talked to people about the same thing. I mean, this has been a tremendous impact. And some people say, it's an unusual circumstance. I mean, I said, you can't just carve it out of your life and say, okay, let's look at the business otherwise. I mean, what do you think it means for people too who are looking to exit their business kind of on a going forward basis?
Well, it's all about being able to let go. It's all about, as I said earlier, and as Chris said, plan. We're very big on planning. And I find a lot of business owners who, well, I'll give you an example. One of my clients asked me, because of a mistake he made, if you own this business, would you fire me? And I said, well, but that you have to understand the difference between being an employee and being an owner.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
That was an important point to that.
And Chris, I know you're on the golf course, but you're probably talking to a lot of business owners. I mean, how has this impacted their thought about exiting, or what are they thinking? Chris?
What am I thinking?
No, what when you talk to other business owners, I'm sure you have not.
All the time.
I mean, are they on hold mentally in terms of looking?
Yeah, a lot of them don't. Some don't have any hobbies whatsoever. The business is their hobby. That's different. Some there's very few who have too many hobbies. I happen to be one of them. But you have to have something other. You got to know what you're going to do next. Plan for yourself as well as plan for your business. Plan your life. Know what your next steps are going to be. I knew mine was going to be kids and grandkids and golf and fishing and diving. I want to do all that stuff while I'm healthy enough. Skiing, diving, fishing, and golf, they take up a fair amount of physical ability, and you want to do that when you can. I don't want to do it when my knees are gone. They're going to go. So, when I talk to a lot of people in my position, some go, you know what? You're right. I want to travel more. I want to do some more things while I'm physically able. So they're starting better plan. A couple of them are starting better plans where their kids are transitioning into running it versus them running day to day. And two, I've even got to hire presidents and CEOs to run their companies for them and then be more directors. So they can step away from day to day because, like me, they stop being aggressive. So no, you want somebody in that seat that's aggressive for growth of your company. And if you're not doing it, have somebody else do it. As Mike said, would you fire me? If you get to that point when you're not doing the right thing for your company, it's time to fire yourself and put somebody else in that seat that's going to do what you want to do if you want to keep the company.
Absolutely.
Apropos, though, of COVID, my philosophy, I guess I'm always an optimist. There's a lot of opportunities for pivots and we had a client in California, Action Coach, that was a steel fabricator, and they're now making barbells, and they decided that that's going to be a product line for them now.
Really? Okay. I think there is a lot of opportunity, but and I think there are folks. That's why people are coming to our door all the time, and they are seeking opportunity. So if you are positioned, there's still an opportunity for you to exit your business and get some value. And remember, there's going to be some kind of transition. The terms may not be exactly what you expect, but I think there really is. And if you're on the acquisition mode, I look at the next 12 to 18 months, especially, as ones which I think if you're really smart about what you're looking at and you kind of, not that you have a crystal ball, but you really look for opportunity, it will be. I wanted to thank our panelists, Joan, Michael, and Chris, for their input, for sharing their story. It really was insightful and beneficial. Our next webinar is July 22nd, and we'll be talking about funding options. My partner, Kyle Griffith, will be hosting that. We are doing these on an every other week basis, pretty much, and trying to pick topics that I think make sense. If anyone has any questions about their own business, if they need to have an evaluation done, and perhaps kind of an analysis of what it looks like from the marketplace, I'd be more than happy to help them with that. I know, if anybody needs help on the transition side or in their business from a post-merger integration part, or CFO services, Joan can help them. I know Michael Brightman is very instrumental in helping really businesses kind of understand where they are, how to get to the next level. And I think, Chris, you know, you're a voice of reason and kind of got some great insight in terms of what someone looks like after they sold their business. So I think we could all be resources if anybody needs. And I would like at this point to thank everyone for attending. Please be safe. Have a great time, and you know, enjoy the summer to the best of your ability. Either stay on the golf course or stay in the pool, but stay safe. Thanks for everyone for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you, Anthony.
Chris,
Thank
are
you,
you
guys.
having golf lessons? And
Yeah, free golf lessons from Chris Vigiano, right?
yeah, I mean, you
We'll
got
want them after today.
it.
Anyway, thanks, guys. We'll sign off. Have a great day.
Right off good. Thank you.